Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the podcast. Beyond the Menu is a show where we'll talk to top industry executives and operators about innovation, growth, and success. We'll have guests from some of your favorite concepts and iconic brands talking about navigating through a pandemic, shifting business models, growing strategic relationships, and much more. We hope you stick around, so make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes, and we'll see you beyond the menu.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us for Beyond the Menu. This is a podcast by Decision Logic. Decision Logic is a restaurant company with world-class technologists offering data-driven back-office solutions that scale to grow growth-oriented restaurateurs. We have partnered with Focus Brands on a number of strategic projects due to the alignment in our brand strategies, innovation, and commitment to excellence in operations. They've agreed to join us on this podcast to talk about restaurant operations, innovation, partnership, and how they are continually successful and thriving despite this ongoing pandemic. Let's start with introductions. My name is Mandy Woolidge. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at Decision Logic. I have been in the restaurant business for over 20 years and have spent the last decade in restaurant technology. I am very grateful to be joined today by Mike Dixon, CFO, and Garrett Fadden, Senior Director of IT at Focus Brands. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mandy. My pleasure.
Would you please tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Sure. This is Mike Dixon. As Mandy mentioned, I'm the CFO at Focus Brands. First, let me take a second and define what Focus Brands is for those of you that are not familiar with it. We are a portfolio of 7 different brands in the food service space. Brands that include the restaurant, in the restaurant space, Moe's, Southwest Grill, McAlister's Deli, and Schlotzsky's Deli. We have a beverage concept in Jamba, and we have 3 snack concepts in Auntie Anne's, Cinnabon, and Carvel. Combined, we have over 6,500, almost 1,000 locations worldwide, operating in 60 different countries. We are, as I mentioned, primarily a franchisor and working with thousands of franchisees around the world. For me personally, I've been in the restaurant business now for 20 plus years, both in full service as well as franchising and casual dining, such as or some of the snack type brands that we have today. So a wide range of restaurant experience.
Excellent. Garrett, how about you?
Hi, I am Garrett Fadden, Senior Director of Retail IT Systems for Focus Brands, which is very centric around point of sale, but also the ancillary systems that integrate with the point of sale or that the restaurant operators need to use to run their business. Like Mandy and Mike, I have been in the restaurant industry for over 20 years now. Pretty much all I've done throughout my work history and career, from restaurant operations to POS installation to support to database maintenance to any number of different things in the retail IT space. And being here at Focus Brands in the franchise business model has been an exciting journey. And there's been a lot of lessons learned throughout all levels of my career and through the different aspects of dealing with technology and the restaurant industry.
It sounds like you both have had really exciting, extensive careers in the restaurant business. So I'm really happy that you're joining us today, specifically around the Focus Brands initiative and all of the things that you guys have been doing with them. I guess to kind of kick things off, we're just going to kind of talk through a couple of different things that you guys have done from both an innovations perspective throughout the times that you've been with the programs, but also talking a lot about how Focus Brands really pivoted and reacted to the different scenarios that we've been presented here over this last year. So I guess to start off with, could one of you talk us through what your team's first reaction was to COVID and how did that change by the weeks or the days or by the hours?
Sure, Manny. This is Mike. I'll take that initially, and I'm sure Garrett will chime in. Obviously, this is an unprecedented challenge for everybody in the industry and every industry, not just the restaurant space. And so for us, the challenge, like everybody else, was to be nimble, to be adaptive, to try to figure out what was going to happen next and react accordingly. For Focus Brands, as I mentioned, being in 60 different countries, we have quite a few locations in Asia, which were probably a good 2 months ahead of the US in terms of feeling the impact from COVID-19. If anything, that just gave us some insight as to what was going to happen or what we could expect. I will say that what happened in the U.S. was probably more dramatic than what we expected, but certainly we were probably a little more prepared than others that didn't have sort of that preview of what was going to come. So we started internally what we call the business continuity team that was meeting daily during the early days of March. So we saw what was happening in January, February, knew we had to start thinking ahead for our businesses in the U.S. That business continuity team was made up of folks from all different functional disciplines at Focus Brands. And the initial meetings were very much of, what do we think is going to happen? How should we react? But then the reality is somewhere around March 14th or 15th, when the economy basically shut down, we obviously, like everybody else, kicked into high gear. And it went from, boy, can our stores stay open? Can our office stay open? Can people work remotely? How can we protect the safety of our guests and our employees and try to keep our franchisees in business? So it was a whirlwind of activity, and it changed daily. So very, very dynamic time.
I think, based on having the business continuity team, the technology teams were pretty well prepared from an infrastructural perspective, knowing that there was a possibility that the workforce would have to be remote for some time potentially. It was very interesting how things evolved. My team from the retail technology side of things had some level of preview to what was going on over in Asia. Predominantly from the technology supply chain side of things, with some big projects that we were working on and getting back ordered on some specific pieces of hardware that were coming in from overseas. And it's interesting because at that point in time, and hearing the stories about what was going on in other countries, the mindset at that point in time, late February, was of, well, I can't imagine anything happening like this here in the US. And then just a few short weeks later, we ended up shutting down. And quickly the mindset changed to, what should we be working on? What work are we currently working on that is going to become inherently obsolete? Is there work that's going to become obsolete? So we really focused on keeping the lights on, run the business activities, doing everything we can to support the franchise community. And it's interesting because the analogy that I've used in telling this story to some people is, it was kind of like that moment when you discover you have a death in the family and you have to stay calm in order to do the right thing so everybody else stays calm. So that's kind of what it was like at first. But the teams did a phenomenal job preparing up front and reacting. And I think we've learned a lot through this journey, adventure, whatever you want to call it, where we are now. And, I'm happy that we've had the success we have over the last few months. But initially it was kind of what is going to happen? How do we react? And here we are.
Mandy, real quick, to put it in context, I think about, we had back in March, we have a biannual franchisee conference where we bring together our franchisees from around the world, as well as a lot of vendors like yourselves. That is a big deal. It's 3,000 to 4,000 people. We were planning to meet in Las Vegas at the end of April. And I can remember in that mid-March timeframe agonizing over, should we have the conference or not? Now, in hindsight, of course you wouldn't have the conference, but at that time, we didn't know what to expect. And that was a huge decision. We had millions of dollars of deposits at risk, and franchisees had travel plans, and to call it off seemed like there's absolutely no way you could call that off. But we did. And again, like I say, in hindsight, of course you called it off. That now it seems like a silly thing to even agonize over.
I completely agree. Some of the things that you've really talked about were really expressing a lot of the unforeseen challenges that you guys had to overcome and face throughout this very difficult and, like you said, very unprecedented time that we all worked through. I know that you obviously choose the correct partners for your business, and that has tremendous financial impact as well as operational impact as you guys are traversing these decisions that you make. What is it that you look for in partners to better your business and your operational choices? And how did that come to light that you had made really great choices throughout this?
Yeah, clearly all of our vendor choices are made with who's going to provide the best service, who has the best pricing. But more importantly, we're looking for people that are committed to our vendors that are committed to our business, our success, as well as their own. And really that did come to the forefront in this COVID situation, where seeing our vendors step up, both financially in terms of helping with deferred payments or abated payments for us, for our franchisees, as well as technologically or just changing their priorities to what's most important for Focus Brands, its customers and its franchisees at this point. And that was very, very encouraging to see. Like I said, that shared commitment to success is a critical factor for us in all our vendor decisions, but to see it really come to life in this situation was great.
That's awesome. Now, Garrett, your team especially really had a project that really crushed it with that vendor partnership and, the exact things that Mike was speaking to. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, we've got a lot of projects going on, as always. But I think one thing that Mike mentioned is very important is the essence of partnership, right? One of the things that we definitely look for is to be able to partner with our vendors and treat it as a shared success model where we all have a vested interest in the success of both organizations. With regards to the project that you're referring to, it's an implementation project of new technology, and what is interesting about this situation is we learned right out of the gate that there was going to be store closures and that the volume was going to be low in stores that were actually opened. But we decided that it might be a good opportunity to limit the risk of change management by implementing new technology while the volume was low. And with a combination of 3 or 4 key partners of ours, we've definitely had success, and we continue to have success through this project. And really, there's a lot of risk at stake with traveling and going to locations and implementing things, but everybody has come to the table with best practices to keep the employees safe, to make sure that we're wearing masks and gloves and staying apart 6 feet at minimum. But it's been a good experience to see how much our vendor partners have supported us and have been willing to go along this journey with us for the success of everybody involved and come out the other side with new technology, and with a potentially new business model in some cases.
Yeah, I think that even in one of your locations with that big project, I think that there was a switch to a kiosk location that couldn't have come at a better time. And I know that was something that the team was really looking forward to implementing on your side. Talk a little bit about that launch.
Absolutely. So we have a new concept store in the Moe's brand that's in Pittsburgh. It's the quote unquote kiosk only location. It has 4 kiosks, I believe. But it's all brand new technology. The ordering process is predominantly through kiosk. There is a point of sale terminal on the counter. But implementing new technology during this pandemic was kind of a groundbreaking event, right? We've had vendors do development work of new product capabilities on the fly through this adventure and implemented in this store all since this pandemic has started. The downstream impact of that in this particular location is that we're actually getting data that we've never gotten before for the Moe's brand, because you don't actually ring up all of the ingredients that are on, say, a home wrecker burrito. Generally, in a typical Moe's location, they just ring up the burrito and move on. In this location, since the guest is ordering it themselves through a kiosk, we get all that modifier information, which leads to better data in the back office system. And now that we've implemented decision logic in this store, and we have the actual versus theoretical numbers tied to actual ingredients in the products that are being sold, we can do better analytics, better forecasting for ordering, better inventory control, which leads to better cost control overall and more profitability. So it's amazing to see how this came together when a lot of the work hadn't been started when the country started to shut down. So it's been amazing what's happened and what our partners have brought to the table and done to support us.
That's great. So that's a lot to do with some different operational changes that happened throughout this whole reaction. Could you talk to me a little bit about what systems or processes were uprooted during this operational shift, and what did you learn from that?
Absolutely. I think the one thing that is near and dear to my heart with the point of sale space and everything that integrates or talks to the point of sale was the menu development process. It pretty much went out the window as we knew it during this time because our business was changing, the mix was changing, the times that guests were coming in was changing. We had to develop menu offerings that could feed more people, whether it's, large party order type things, family packs, market style offerings where you could bring the food home and cook it at your own home location. Those things had to happen quickly. And they're on the menu now, they're going to remain on the menu. It's interesting how that evolves, but the work that goes into something like that is a lot larger than it looks than from the outside. You have to, update the point of sale. You have to update your online ordering. You have to update your back office. Then you have to have accurate recipe information to put into the back office system, which is, largely comes out of the R&D and culinary teams. But I think you learn a lot as you're putting things into the systems that feed back into that menu development process. So that was the one thing from an uprooted perspective, as you put it, that really impacted our teams. But it has done, wonders for the business because some of those offerings are really the top sales mix items on the menus right now. So it's been very interesting.
Mike, from your perspective, what of those items do you think is going to continue to happen going forward? And what are some of the things that you foresee changing?
Well, I think as Garrett talks about the menu, that to me, if I take a step back, it's really what's changed as a result of COVID is how our guests want to engage with our brands. And we need to be in whatever areas those engagement opportunities are. And to Garrett's point, it's different times for meals, it's different meal occasions, it's curbside pickup, it's delivery, it's all of those things that as consumer preferences have changed as a result of COVID, we have adapted quickly. We have seen, as you would expect, a huge shift in our sales from sort of on-premise to off-premise sales. And our belief is that those off-premise channels, while they grew as a result of COVID, will stick after COVID has passed because people like it. It was a convenience, whether it was the new menu items, whether it was a taco kit or a family meal from Moe's, whether it was a curbside pickup at a Jamba or McAlister's. Those are conveniences that guests realize, hey, this is nice. I'm doing it because I want to feel safe in a COVID environment, but at the end of the day, it's still convenient. So the challenge for us was not only to put it in, but it's to be effective and efficient at doing it. And then understanding that when COVID is passed, look, guests will be back in the restaurant, but they'll also want to take advantage of those new channels that we created. And it's good for business. It's good for the consumer.
That's great. Yeah, I've been really interested to see what of those things we'll be able to walk back after this. Specifically when we look at other industries that are also reacting in that same way. But are we going to be able to walk back the curbside pickup for alcohol? Are we going to be able to walk back the family packs? I know my family has definitely taken advantage of some of the family meals because I'm a foodie and I love to cook, but man, I was getting a little burned out on the stuff that I like to make. So being able to pick those things up from our local McAlisters and Schlotzsky's was a big win for our family as well. So.
Right.
All right. So no one could really ever strategize for this particular crisis, and we'd hope we would never have to. How do you think that the choices that you made impact you during that time of crisis? And I know you talked a lot about how you pivoted so quickly and the things that you did to kind of overcome that. What are some of the things you learned as far as strategies and your go-forward plans?
Yeah, I think really from the focus level, it's across all the 7 brands that we support. Our immediate reaction when this thing hit was, again, to go into a cash preservation mode. At the end of the day, cash is king, and we need to be in a position that we could continue to support our franchisees and ultimately support our guests. And when this started, no one had any idea what the impact would be, what the duration would be. So you kind of go back into your shell, so to speak, and say, what's absolutely necessary? We made a lot of hard decisions in the early days in terms of what we could support, what our staffing could be. We had to unfortunately let some folks go or put some folks on furlough, but those were the kind of decisions that right out of the gate gave us the sort of the flexibility and the confidence that we'd be in a position to support the business going forward. And so I think like most businesses, we probably pulled back too far but then had the opportunity to be in a position to support, like I said, the franchisees as businesses started to turn. And all the stuff we've been talking about, it does take time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of people power. And so we had to have the resources to make those menu changes, make the technology updates that Garrett talked about, deliver to our franchisees. How is curbside going to work? All those things. So we put ourselves in a position to be successful. And again, in hindsight, I think we made the right choices, and I think we're in a good position now, even though we're not past the COVID crisis. We're in a good position to fight our way through the rest of it and come out very strong on the other end.
That's great.
And I think, the way that the strategic decisions trickled down into, the tactical level activities that need to take place is an important piece here. And what I mean by that is, there was at some point in time, what seemed like daily shifts in legislation, albeit they weren't daily shifts in some cases, but it really seemed like it because of the fact that we were looking through a lot of legal documents to find out how, some of these things in different jurisdictions actually impacted us, right? And with decisions being made at jurisdictional levels, that means that there's a lot of decision making to be made at, the tactical level. It's interesting how those things play out. And in hindsight now, I'm glad with some of the approaches that we took with not reacting so quickly because something would change and then maybe it was going to change a few days later. And in some cases, we reacted very quickly and maybe shouldn't have. Changing systems to accommodate something that was maybe a temporary change in legislation that wasn't going to stick around or maybe wasn't actually possible to execute operationally or wasn't really in play if stores weren't actually open. So those are things that, I think that we did a very, very good job at. But in hindsight, I think, it's important to recognize when you need to take action and when you do not need to take action. And just make sure that you're reacting at the right time based on the specific circumstances and how they impact your specific business.
Yeah, I'd really like to add on to that. I know that you and I talked considerably around the Decision Logic's response to that as well with the strategy. And, we saw a lot of vendors in the industry really racing to get messaging out there immediately. And Decision Logic decided to do exactly like what you said. We wanted to assess the situation before we responded because we wanted to make sure that we were responding with genuine response to the situation, but also wanted to make sure that we were being authentic and especially empathetic to all of our partners. And I felt like Focus Brands really did the same thing. You guys responded with authenticity and you responded with empathy with all of your franchisees that were in the same boat and supporting all those teams that you support from a corporate structure. But then in addition to that, I saw you really working with your partners to try to make sure to take care of all of the franchise partners that you support. So kudos to you guys. I mean, I think that you really reacted in the right way with the right level of putting the gas on, if you will, to try to get those things handled. So really great response from our team to you guys. Hats off for sure.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And it goes back to that essence of partnership and why it's so important.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that I did want to bring up is that you have talked a lot about how multiple departments responded to all of this. You've talked about the franchise partners and, technology partners and things like that. One of the things that I'm really interested to hear is that what are some of the things that you saw from your teams that inspired you through this? And what would you take away from that?
I think that the number one thing for me and my team was really the human aspect of things and how the team really came together. Now, I'm very proud and inspired every day by my team. I'm lucky I have a very strong team of people that are very tight knit, but it's amazing the different lifestyles that people have or the different outside of work life that people have, whether it's a married couple with children or a single person living alone. Everybody fully recognized the differences in everybody's lifestyles, and we're able to reconnect. And if somebody was, quarantining alone, we're going to, get on a call with them and make sure that they have somebody to talk to. Or if somebody has children and they're trying to deal with figuring out how to homeschool, we're going to help pick up that workload and make sure that they don't have the stress of trying to keep up with all this work that's unknown at the same time while they're trying to make sure that their children get educated. So I think the human aspect, the team camaraderie across the board was, the most inspiring thing to me, and continues to be that way, because I think that I wouldn't say made a shift, but we've gotten stronger, and it's not something that we're going to walk back. You continue to get stronger as a team. And it's amazing what it's done to the personal relationships, interpersonal relationships of all the members of the team, and the extended team, even across to the vendor partnerships, and some of the people that we work with on a day-to-day basis that aren't even in our organization. It's incredible how much this has strengthened our team and broader team.
Yeah, I would add that I think I was really impressed and inspired by, one, the adaptability of our staff, and two, their commitment to supporting our franchisees. I mean, we are in the hospitality industry, and it becomes pretty clear in this situation that we have people that work for us, work in our business, that are in hospitality because they're very hospitable people. That's the way they think. And so, the adaptability to be upset the way we were, hey, you can't come to the office anymore, you got to work from home. And to see people, I know personally getting emails and Zoom calls at 11, 12 o'clock at night is like, okay, this is a little bit much. Even though we're not in the office, we do have to have some boundaries on work hours. But I think the hospitality aspect, the way that our teams wanted to continue to serve the franchisees, serve our guests in so many different ways. Now it's not talking about food. Now it's talking about safety and cleanliness, and the health of our staff and the health of our guests. We had some strong arguments over the procedures that had to happen in the restaurants to make sure they were clean, because, as we said earlier, guidelines were changing. We didn't know what exactly had to happen. But boy, we wanted to make sure we were going to the ultimate level to protect the safety and health of our guests and our staff and our franchisees. So, boy, that really came out, and it really inspired some of the folks on the ops team. I'm just blown away at how I don't know how detailed they were and how committed to all those things I just mentioned every day. And I'd get exhausted, and these guys would just keep going. We've got to figure this out. We've got to figure this out, and they did. Kudos to them.
That's excellent. Now I'm going to take it a step further. I know that you work with a lot of partners, and you work with partners from a supply chain aspect, from technology, from innovation to operations teams, and support throughout, your entire operations. You mentioned a lot of things about teams taking care of each other. Talk to me a little bit about some things that you saw from partners that really inspired you, that help you to continue to run.
Yeah, let me just talk about this on the high level. It's interesting to me that, in this business, and like a lot of businesses, we've all experienced natural disasters before, and, you get a hurricane in Florida or something, and our businesses suffer, our franchisees in that area suffer. And we go to our vendors and say, hey, how do you help us? How can you help us? And whether it's just getting some refrigerated trucks on property, or whether it's, some deferred payments or extended payment terms, that's fine because it's so isolated. In this case, it's not only nationwide, it was worldwide. So our vendors were under the same financial pressures that we were under, the same financial pressures that our franchisees were under. So I thought it was interesting that, the immediate reaction from our teams is, hey, those vendors have to help us out. They have to give us free product, or they have to extend payment terms. Well, when you go to those vendors, they're having the exact same conversations with their vendors and suppliers. So it was very difficult. I was, again, very, very impressed with the way our vendors stepped up to offer support to our franchisees in the form of, in some cases, free product, and in other cases of just deferred or extended payment or discounted terms, et cetera. Very, very impressed, because I know they were under the same pressures we were. And that goes back to what we talked about, picking vendors that have that shared commitment to success. And boy, they really came through.
I think it was overwhelming almost, the support and partnership that we had from a lot of our vendor partners. You got to remember that we have a few brands that operate predominantly in malls, and with malls shut down, there's a lot of stores that were just not open, that just did not have any revenue coming in. And, rather than expect that there was going to be payment, knowing that there wasn't any sales revenue coming in, it was remarkable the level of ability of our partners to waive fees, delay fees, 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 months. It's really one of those things that makes you proud to be in this business and proud to have partners like we do. I think, some of the other things, shifting away from the financial aspect of things, would be the product roadmaps. It's amazing that our needs changed, right? The business changed. And the agility of some of our technology partners to shift their roadmaps to develop new capabilities for us during a time when resources were more limited and financial resources were more limited is just, frankly, it's amazing. And I think that, it goes to show, again, going back to that, spirit of partnership, that it's important. It's an everyday thing. And, it's very inspirational when you go back and look at it through the lens of, look at what we just did over the last few months, and forget that there was even a pandemic.
That's really true. I love how you really talked about how there was still that focus on innovation and still that focus on partnership throughout this crisis. One of the things that I wanted to really talk about is that your team has a pretty progressive approach as far as innovation and things like that is concerned. Talk to me a little bit about, it sounds a lot like that focus became ramped up kind of through this crisis. Talk a little bit about that.
I think it's kind of humorous, if you ask me, because a lot of the stuff that we were working on before the country kind of shut down is stuff that would have been valuable during the pandemic anyway. We're working on custom mobile applications, we're working on curbside pickup, all the sort of capabilities that make the consumer's life easier, so we can drive volume and drive traffic and drive sales revenue. I think it's really, a lot of the stuff we're working on is just table stakes in this day and age. But I think you always have to look at the bright side. You always have to try to find a silver lining. And if there's a way that you can, find an opportunity to benefit the business during a time like this, you have to just go do that and take a chance and see if it'll work out. In some cases it has worked out for us, and we're continuing our approach of trying to advance the technology in all of our brands through this and seeing what 2021 will bring, because we're going to have wrapped up a lot of stuff that, looking back, you could draw the perception that, wow, that was really an impossible task to do. So I think it's very important to, just find opportunities wherever you can, and find that silver lining.
I really like how you touched on that, because when you get to the other side of this and you look back at the giant project that you did for Moe's, especially with working with, the other channel partners that Decision Logic had partnered with to help with that project, Revel and HonorBelt and the other teams that were involved with that, Freedom Pay, really replacing an entire technology stack, like you said, was kind of lessened a little bit because there wasn't as operationally in use at that time, but still a giant undertaking with all of the hurdles and challenges that came in place with not being able to travel and still being able to innovate through to the other side of that. How do you feel like the team's going to reflect on that next year as they get to the other side of that?
I think that this is just practice for, more projects to come, right? We might not be ripping and replacing an entire technology stack, but whenever you can mitigate risk by, reducing the change management aspects of things, you can build a muscle memory. And I think that's important because the world isn't going to change to the extent of technology not being important. It's only going to become more and more important as we've seen in recent years. So getting that muscle memory on how to effectively roll out new technology, new capabilities, the training aspects of it, the operational aspects of it, the partnership aspects of it. You mentioned several of our vendor partners that are involved in this huge rollout we're doing in Moe's right now. It's important to be able to collaborate with multiple different partners and all be one team with the same shared common goal. So I look at it through that lens of we're going to continue to get better because that's what we try to enforce into the team. But I think it's easy when you have a group of people that constantly want to get better.
I'll just say it's raised my expectations of what I can expect out of Garrett and the team.
I mean, when they show that they can overcome what seems to be impossible, I can definitely see why you would think that, Mike. So that's a really progressive approach about your technology changes that you're looking at. I know you talked a lot about kind of streamlining those ideas and continuing to work for that repeatable approach. Mike, do you want to talk about that from an operations perspective as far as growth strategy and serving your teams?
Well, I think it's, operationally what this has taught us a lot of new ways to do business, just like Garrett talked about on the technology front. Operationally, to not be able to travel and visit our franchisees and get in the stores on a regular basis like we normally do, we've switched to all different ways of engaging with our franchisees to ensure their level of service. That includes, Zoom calls where you're doing sort of virtual visits of the restaurant to make sure operationally they're operating up to standards. We're meeting they're meeting our requirements, and we're fulfilling their needs with support as necessary. This is a lot of I'll say the operational practices in the restaurant industry haven't changed in decades. And, I've always joked about the fact that sort of the span of control that a district manager or an area manager can oversee 10 company-owned stores or 40 franchise stores, whatever the metrics are, hasn't changed despite technology changing dramatically. This has shown that we can expand those, we can change those, and still deliver the level of quality and service to our franchisees that they demand and expect. So those are some learnings that came out of this sort of, by accident or by necessity, really, that will carry over well beyond COVID. And I'm anxious to see how we continue to refine those. It's interesting. I was just in a meeting yesterday with our international team, and we had a franchisee that opened 2 Jamba locations in Japan. We couldn't travel to Japan, so all of the training was done virtually. And the stores have, I shouldn't say surprising, but open up incredibly strong. And I say surprisingly only because, Japan has their own restrictions as well from a COVID perspective. Stores open incredibly strong. The level of service is great. And all of the training for a brand new franchisee was done virtually. That's pretty impressive.
That's very impressive. Garrett, anything you want to add to that?
One of the things that, I really thought was amazing about this whole experience from kind of an operational perspective, but, kind of the corporate operations is the angle I'm looking at, is the potential shift in mindset going forward for people to be willing to learn new tools, new capabilities, that sort of thing. It's interesting how before this, a lot of people weren't using some of the tools we had to their full extent. Microsoft Teams, for instance, right? And now we all live in Teams, just like the commercials we see on television say, I live in Teams. And that's true. I spend probably, 6 to 8 hours a day in Microsoft Teams, and I'm able to and effectively able to do my job. And I think that it's going to change how people look at new tools and implementation of new capabilities, and not be so scared of them.
That's great. I do feel like it's worth calling out too that the restaurant persona, the people that work in the restaurant, are incredibly resilient. And I think this was just a great testimony to those of us that grew up in the restaurants and continue to support restaurant, whether it's through technology or from an operational perspective. It just shows the resiliency of the industry, and it shows the commitment that the industry has to not only surviving, but thriving in what seems to be impossible conditions. So kudos to the industry for sure, and everybody that has a part in it and their ability to support that. So for those of you that are listening that are partnered up with restaurants right now, we definitely give a hats off to all of you because we know what you're going through, all of us on this podcast anyways, and support you with that. So very cool. Anything that you guys would like to add, any questions that you have or any points that you want to make that we didn't have specific questions on?
I think we've touched on it, but I just want a couple of things when you talk about support during the real depths of the COVID crisis. As a company, Focus Brands initially jumped in and offered financial support or for financial support to all of our franchisees. That was very important for the success of our franchisees, to be, sharing that commitment with them. I think with our staff, we've done things to provide financial support for them. As I mentioned earlier, it's unfortunate we had to let some folks go. No one likes to do that. And certainly we were anxious to be able to rebuild our teams over time as businesses improves. But in the interim, between ourselves and with our private equity owners Work Capital, we're able to create a financial fund that supported our employees, those in the direst need, to get them some support. So I think we took the right steps in a very difficult environment. I'm proud of what we were able to accomplish.
Yeah, and I'm also proud of, what our community has been able to accomplish, right in line with that. Focus Brands spearheaded a program called Focus on the Front Lines, which centered around our new Mix It Up gift card program. And through this program and through the generosity and partnership of a lot of our vendors, we've been able to create 26,000 meals for frontline healthcare workers. So it's broader than just the restaurant industry. It's the restaurant industry giving back to the frontline workers. And it goes back to that human aspect of things. And that's what this is all about, right? Decision Logic is in the people business, and Focus Brands is really in the people business as well. And I think that's where everything really, truly comes together.
Thank you for calling that out, because yeah, we were definitely proud supporters of that program, and just really seeing how, again, we all work in the people business, like you said, and it's communities supporting communities, right? Restaurants are the pillars of the communities in which they are present. Local franchisees are, supporting local baseball teams and supporting local efforts and charities that are taking place in those environments. And being able to have all of your restaurants and all the communities in which you're located, being able to provide those much sought after top class meals to the frontline workers that are supporting this entire pandemic and this effort. It just shows that gathering, as we are in the restaurant business, as we are attending restaurants, that's where we gather. That's where we celebrate. That's where we mourn. That's where we come together as teams, and being able to contribute to the workers that would like to go to those places and weren't able to for a while. And then those of us that still want to gather and still support one another, I think is a really, really great coming together of all of those resources. So we're really, really happy to contribute to that, and glad that you guys presented that as an opportunity.
We appreciate your support. Thank you.
Absolutely. Anything else you guys want to touch on of things that you felt like were really either inspiring or innovative throughout this process?
I guess I would just say that, we've talked a lot about the successes we've had, but don't want to lose sight of the fact that it was incredibly challenging, and by no means is it over. We are still in the midst of this. We have to, we cannot let our guard down. And we talk about that all the time, that, be happy that we've accomplished what we have accomplished. We've provided the support we've provided. We've put our business in a stable and sound place to be able to do this beyond the immediate future, but recognize that this isn't over. We need to keep our guard up, like I said, and be prepared to support our franchisees and our guests for some time to come. And I know that there's a lot of our franchisees that business is certainly far from normal, and we need to, keep our eyes out and help them as much as possible. And that's true across the restaurant industry in general.
Absolutely.
Completely agree. And I think it's important also to remember that, in the franchise community, they're really operating their own small business. And, I know that, my family and a lot of the people that I interact with have made a very, very pointed effort to, spend time and money supporting local businesses, particularly through this time, because it's such a challenging time. But it's important to support some of these operators as well, because people might not realize that Moe's or McAlister's or Schlotzsky's operator is actually operating their own small business. It's not just a chain restaurant that we need to, avoid during this time. We're really supporting a family that owns those stores, and I don't want to lose sight of that. And I think that's very important for people out there listening to recognize that when you see a chain restaurant, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going into the machine. You are supporting a small business through that process as well.
Absolutely.
I really like the call on that as well. Again, we're all in this together. And like you said, Mike, this is far from over. And it would be wrong of us to not definitely make the recognition, at least to recognize that there are still businesses, including those of our own, that are still struggling through this. And yes, making sure that we are supporting our local franchised business, as well as locally owned and operated businesses throughout this, and in whatever way that we can. Obviously, meet those operators where they can interact with us, but then also help each other throughout this entire thing. Again, people helping people is something that we should all be focused on. So we're really grateful for that. Grateful for the communities in which that we are operating as well, and the communities in which we have partnered locations, and trying to support them as well. So I know that you guys, your reach extends all the way across the country, and in some cases around the world. And Decision Logic is the same. So we definitely want to challenge everybody out there to continue to support local and continue to get out there and help businesses where you can.
Right on.
All right. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for everybody that took the time to listen to our podcast today. Please, if you have questions or if you want to learn more about Focus Brands, we can make sure that we are including a website that you can click on to learn more about the Focus on the Front Lines effort, as well as the Focus Brands portfolio as a whole. We'll also include some information about Decision Logic in the podcast, as well as other partners in which we've mentioned and worked with today. So thank you so much for joining us today for Beyond the Menu, and we'll look forward to future efforts in the future. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mandy.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Beyond the Menu is presented by Decision Logic, enterprise management software built by restaurateurs for restaurateurs. Are you ready to gain control of your back office? Check us out at decisionlogic.co. That's DECISIONLOGIC.co.